What are you interested in measuring? Is it an individual's blood glucose level? Or perhaps their temperature throughout the day? Or perhaps you're interested in the tensile strength of cables made from a certain steel composite? Or even the reaction time of chemicals? Whatever the measure of interest, it is referred to as being a random variable, as it may assume any number of possible values or responses, usually within some range. It is a characteristic of the individual or item or subject we are studying. The value or response for the random variable, or characteristic of interest, will vary depending upon the individual or item we happen to be observing, or the point in time at which we do so. The specific values that we observe for a variable are known as data. Knowing a variable's type is important, as it determines which analyses or methods of reporting or displaying the data are appropriate to apply. The first step is to determine whether the variable is categorical or numerical. Do the responses to the variable fall into categories? For example, if measuring sex of each person, the possible responses are either male or female. Each person falls into one of those two categories. Hence, the variable or measure of interest or characteristic, sex, is a categorical variable. What about when the possible responses are numbers which reflect the quantity or amount of something? For example, if measuring blood glucose level of each person, the value we observe is the quantity of glucose in the blood, usually measured in millimoles per litre. So the variable, blood glucose level, is a numerical variable. The second step further identifies categorical variables as either nominal or ordinal, and numerical variables as either discrete or continuous. If the categorical variable's responses have no natural order to them, then it is called a nominal variable. For example, for the variable sex, the possible responses are male and female, and there is no reason why male should be listed before female, nor vice versa. There is no natural order. So sex is a nominal variable. If the categorical variable's responses have a natural order, then it is called an ordinal variable. For example, risk of developing celiac disease. If the possible responses are low, medium, or high, then we can see the categories have a natural order. Low comes before medium, which comes before high on the scale of low through to high. If the numerical variable's possible responses are numbers arising from a measuring process and can assume only certain or distinct values, then it is called a discrete variable. For example, consider the variable daily number of adverse events, which measures the number of undesirable outcomes occurring in a hospital ward each day. We can observe either 0, or 1, or 2, or 3, and so on events, but we cannot observe 1.35 events. It must be a whole number. This is an example of a discrete variable. It can only assume certain values. If the numerical variable's possible responses are numbers arising from a measuring process and can assume any value within some range or along some continuum, then it is called a continuous variable. For example, blood glucose level. We can record the result as precisely as the measuring device or instrument allows. We could observe values like 5.54 millimoles per litre, or even to more decimal places, depending on the measuring instrument. Note, it is not the measuring instrument that determines whether a variable is discrete or continuous. The fact that blood glucose level could be measured to be any value within some range is what determines that the variable blood glucose level is continuous. When we record data for variables, we consider each individual as a record. This is presented as a row in a data table. Then we would record the data for each variable in columns. So if person 1 was male and had a blood glucose level of 5.45, and we recorded similar values for each person, then we see the data table build. So you've now learnt about the 4 variable types and are getting some data. So it's time to build upon this and see how we might present data arising from each of these variable types. You can learn more about this in the next video in this series.